The meeting will begin in 1 minute. The meeting will begin in 1 minute. Thank you.
All right, we'll call this meeting of the Land Use Committee to order. Welcome to the October 17, 2017 meeting, and thanks to all in attendance and to those who will be watching today. Did anyone have a chance to review the minutes of our last meeting and would like to make a motion to approve?
So moved, Nitzert.
Second, Kiley.
Okay, thank you. And we will move on. Today's agenda, the first on the agenda.
We get a vote.
We need a vote, please, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. It's my second time. We'll catch on, right? All right. Now we'll move on to Matt Tobias, our code enforcement manager. He will be giving us an update on the parking strip ordinance. Welcome, Matt.
Hello, thank you. Matt Tobias, Planning and Building Services. Today I wanted to give you, I was requested to be here just to give you a quick update on the parking strip ordinance. We're in our second, I'll call it our second season with the parking strip ordinance. And when we developed the parking strip ordinance, the guidelines we had laid out for it were we would not start our enforcement program until the spring of 18. So I think the point for today is just to kind of let me explain to you guys kind of where we're at, where we came from with the parking strip ordinance. I myself and my department, we received this season, probably from around, I'll say spring till now, about a dozen complaints with the parking strip ordinance. That's what we've received so far. The complaints we received, they've 100% been completely related to the height restrictions in the actual parking strip ordinance. I can think off the top of my head a few of those. I had one case where there were sunflowers in the parking strip ordinance that were, almost 5 feet tall. We had an elderly couple where they have some sagebrush growing in the parking strip, and it just gets really, really tall, and there's kind of a small sight line. Great couple. I've met with them personally. I went out to their house, had a conversation with them, and let them know what the parking strip ordinance was, what the violation was. So that got corrected. I've had a couple complaints where it was the height of some flowers that were in the parking strip. Same thing, they've gotten corrected. I have one case right now that I'm still working with, a gentleman with some wildflowers that are, well, I shouldn't say wild, they're kind of wildflowers in the parking strip. We've tried to contact him a couple different times. We sent him a notice of violation. Still working with him. If we're not there yet, but if we were in the enforcement period, he would be probably coming due for a citation soon. But out of the, like I said, out of the dozen that we've worked with so far this year, it's just worked the good old way where, you work with them to fix the problem, and it got corrected in a very timely manner. Also, this summer, I think it's probably been, I'm going to say around 25 different times where I've had a resident contact me saying they've heard something about the parking strip ordinance and they would like me to explain what their options are. I've done that, probably more than 25, but it's just around that ballpark. I go through the whole ordinance with them, letting them know what their options are, letting them know that this is it's a less restrictive ordinance now. We're allowing them to kind of, plant flowers, wildflowers, and grasses in their parking strip, along with a small amount of rock. So that I've gone through with people. Haven't gotten a lot of pushback on the ordinance really at all. it's oh wow, I can't wait to get out and get started on this. And then that's kind of the feedback that I've been getting from some people. So as far as that's kind of a real quick update. I know there's been some questions that have been asked that have been kind of sent my way. We have not started implementation of the parking strip ordinance with the full implementation with the enforcement. We're still working on our enforcement plan. That is something we have a big plan to roll that out in spring. We're going to do a big PR push here in the spring with our enforcement plan, along with the full implementation of the parking strip ordinance. That is our plan. Like I said, the violations we received this summer, like that I've received and my office has received, has been all based on the height, restrictions. And then I guess the plan, once we roll this full implementation out of the parking strip ordinance, I've already talked with Heather Hitterall about this, and her and I are already starting to think about, we're going to roll this thing out, do a big press release, big media release. I also plan to do another utility billing mailing. That is something that I'm planning on doing. Once this ordinance becomes effective, fully implementation, that's going to roll out. We have it on our website. It's all on the front page of the code enforcement website. And throughout this summer, anytime I went to a public meeting, I tried my best to try to say, hey, if I was at a neighborhood meeting, to mention the parking strip ordinance and the benefits of it. So that's what I got for you really quick for an update.
Thank you, Matt. You have any questions? Councilor Neitzert?
The one thing that I'm hearing about is the rocks.
Yep.
And I have a handful of constituents that have contacted me. There's one in particular I've been working with. And as you know, when this came about, really the number was, there wasn't really a scientific decision on the number. It was more or less 25, 50, percentage, and you just had to pick something. I'll just take one couple in particular. I've sat down with them for dinner, and we've gone through everything. It's a lovely older couple, and they've spent many years on an arterial. You know the one I'm talking about. I won't say specifically where, but they've spent many years where the grass would get burned, and they try different things, and they do a lot of plantings and stuff and maintain a beautiful yard. Ironically, most of the other lots right along there are burned, and don't look very attractive. Anyway, as you know, what they did was last year they removed the grass. They had spent tons and tons of money trying things, and they just threw up their hands and they filled the whole boulevard with river rock, larger river rock. And they spent a couple $1,000 on all of this plus all of the work. And so they're really afraid that once we get to 2018 that they're going to start getting citations. What are we going to do about those with out of compliance when it comes to the rock? Otherwise, it looks nice. But they've got 100% rock.
I'll just go back to when, I was planning and building services. We had a seat at the table when we were talking about the ordinance, along with engineering. And with me tonight, I have Shannon Verhey and Kurt Pepper with the engineering department. The 25% was something that I would say was thought long and hard about. And we came up with that just due to the fact that, on an arterial street like that, you have that rock has the ability to get out into the street. Especially, and I've even heard from our street superintendent saying that, sometimes if we get a really bad winter, our parking strip, the main purpose of the parking strip is for snow storage. That's what it's designed for. That's what it's there for. The last thing we want to do is to have an excess amount of rock out there and then have to have our crews go through and maybe take off some of that snow because it's getting so high in that parking strip. We haven't had a winter like that for a while, but if we had to go out and do that, we would maybe typically use a motor grader to get some of that snow off. And we would be pulling a lot of rock back out that was on there. So limiting the amount of rock that's allowable in the ordinance the way it sits, that was kind of the intent. We understand that there's a small area there which is considered the splash, where the water is and the salt is gonna get into that. That's why we figured at 25%, because on your typical parking strip, you can go a couple feet from the curb, and that kind of would cover a lot of that splash, so to say, on some of those streets like that. So that's kind of the methodology that we used when we came to that 25%.
Just to follow up, the struggle I have, and I totally get that about it ending up in the storm sewers and all that stuff. The struggle I have is in a lot of the newer arterial designs, we're putting the sidewalk or we're paving right at the street and we're putting the landscaping behind it for exactly this reason, because it's a nightmare to try to maintain. So the city's making an adjustment so that they don't have to continue to maintain this, but then the citizens kind of in this, especially the ones on the arterials. I guess we could argue about locals, but I just wonder if there isn't some provision, maybe if we could help them out with how they could do splash guards, or if because maybe the ground cover would live if you had if the first half or couple feet was splash guards or something. It's just I just don't know what to tell them, because I lived on a collector that was an emergency snow route, and every year I would plant grass. It would look beautiful going into the fall, and then it would get destroyed, and I would do it over and over again. And you do want to throw up your hands, and grass is not cheap either. So I really feel for him, and I'm just trying to figure out how can we solve this for him. Because these are not derelicts. These are people that take care of their property. They're wonderful people. They're just kind of just going, hey, this is awful. Yeah. So.
And to answer the second part of your question, that's the enforcement plan is something we're still working on. We want to make sure that enforcement plan is really, really perfect. And that's something that we're going to roll out in the spring. So how we're going to enforce this, we're still working on that, to be quite honest with you. And that's something we're going to vet through our legal department too. And we're going to want to make sure they're on board with it as well too. So that's something that don't have a quick answer for you right now on that, but in those areas where there are large amounts of rock, that's just that. I mean, we vetted that process, and it's just the fact that the rock can get down in the storm sewer and everything else. So we just kind of want to limit the amount of rock that we actually have out in the parking strip there.
Councilor Kiley.
Thank you. And thank you, Matt, for your comments, and Kurt and Shannon. I worked extensively with the three of you on this a few years back when I was chair of Land Use Committee, because this was an issue at that time that we were trying to provide direction on. So it's very timely that you're coming forward now that we're ending year 2, because year 1, as you had just explained, was educational in nature to try to educate the public as much as possible. And I know that we're continuing to do that. Yeah. You're continuing to do that today as you're meeting with different groups. This year, year 2, was we would then start the warning, being a little bit more aggressive without fines and things of that nature. And so now we're moving into the enforcement year next year. So it's good that we're discussing this. We also knew that going in that there might need to be some tweaks to this, as well as any other ordinance that we pass, especially as things change and processes change. I do know, addressing the rock issue, that was no pun intended, but boy, we were really between a rock and a hard place with trying to make a final decision on that. It was either too much or too little or any amount, because in addition to the impact it would have on equipment, our graders and snow removal equipment, and going into the storm sewer, it can negatively impact bicyclists, motorcyclists, even pedestrians crossing the roadway. So it's that, I'm sure, is still going to be one that is going to hard to come up with a final solution. But I thank you for your efforts today and the efforts of everybody else that was involved in this, because we had a lot of citizen members that were actively involved at that time too. And I do know that you probably are honorary member of some garden clubs as a result of your effort you've made. So good job. And again, it's good timing, because it's our duty to continue to educate the public as we move forward, especially into year 3. Thank you.
Councilor Staley.
Matt, what month are you planning to implement this?
It'll be, I think we have it in the ordinance where it says a spring.
But what month might that be?
That's a good guess.
About April?
Probably,
May?
I would say. I think it is actually. I think we do say May 1st, if I'm correct. I think it does say May 1st in there.
So what month are you going to be putting it out in the water bill?
It would be before that. I mean, we probably would try to shoot for maybe March or April. to get
And
that
I have
information
to
out
say that, I don't know if you were involved with that brochure, but I've been passing that around whenever I speak to groups.
Yep.
That lovely brochure with.
there. Yeah, I helped put it together.
Yeah, very, very nice. So having something like that on the water bill that would.
Yeah, and
would
that's
be-
what went out last time in the water bill, was that same brochure too, so.
Oh, you sent that
That was,
brochure to
that
all
was
the
the same one that went out, yeah.
50,000? Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Okay, so then back to the enforcement plans. So give us an idea of what some of the options could be. Because you said you're going to meet with the legal team.
Yeah, so that's a process that we want to, we want to vet that process thoroughly with our legal team, just to make sure we're going to do it right. And we have some big decisions to make on, if we could quote unquote grandfather something in. That's something we got to vet through our legal process. If it was there before the ordinance was passed, is it something that we'll enforce? And those are things that it's all on that's why I said that our enforcement response, we're still working on our enforcement plan. And that's something that we'll have it finalized before we implement our program.
Oh, because I don't think the word grandfathered in has ever been, except maybe when we talk about those massive mailboxes.
That's a separate. That's what we're talking about. Like I said, that's something we're going to vet through with our legal department to make sure that our enforcement response plan is the right thing that we're going to do.
So is the council going to be involved with, because that's kind of a policy, isn't it, as well?
Well, the ordinance is passed the way it is. That's something I'll have to go through legal on.
And then is that going to be included in your water bill announcement as well? How the enforcement?
That would be our intent, yes.
Okay, well, I would appreciate being involved with the discussion as you're having it, that you keep us apprised of where we're at with that, instead of having the final verdict, given to all of us.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet.
And I also want to say, Matt, I think you're a great public servant. I think you have a beautiful attitude towards citizens. You're very kind. You're helpful. You have a great heart, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilor Kylie?
There was just one other question that I forgot to ask earlier, and sorry I didn't give you time to prepare for this. But now that we're basically 2 years into this process and this new ordinance, because our growing season is unfortunately coming to an end here shortly, how much of a reduction in percentage-wise do you think what our efforts have been the last 2 years, how much is it cut down on complaints or need to address issues?
Yeah, that's something, for instance, we just don't get a lot of complaints. And that's just where we're at with this right now. In the last couple of years, to say I've had, my office has taken, and me personally have taken 25 complaints on parking strip ordinances. We've also, in that same time, done, this year so far, we've taken we have over 2,000 vegetation cases this year alone. So, it's a very, very small percentage, less than 1%, that we're taking as far as. So we're just not getting a lot of complaints on it. But although the one thing I will say is that when someone asks me about it, they get very excited about it. And I explained to them that this is a less restrictive ordinance. And when those things shouldn't be said at the same time, less restrictive ordinance, but that's what it is. We're allowing people to actually do what they want to do in the parking strip with some guidelines on there. If they want to put flowers in their parking strip, they can. So the whole ordinance, it's received very well.
And then, so I guess you probably have just answered my follow-up question. Once somebody has been approached and has been made aware, somebody who's maybe out of compliance and they've been made aware what the new regulations are, have they willingly complied then? What's the follow-up been?
Yeah, the follow-up has been good so far. I'll say that. Like I said, I had the opportunity to sit out with it was an 89-year-old man going through leukemia as he trimmed his sagebrush, and that was his daily chore. And I got to spend some time with him, and as we sat out there, and he cut his sagebrush. But he did it wholeheartedly. He said he didn't like it anyway, and he was trimming it back. I had another lady that, the sunflower lady, she wasn't very happy, but that was a site obstruction that she was causing by her neighbors with the fact that the sunflowers are so tall. She wasn't very happy, but you know, there's positives and negatives to everything there. So, but overall, it hasn't been very painful. I'll say that.
Very good. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
We'll move on to any open discussion. Doesn't look like it. All right, so we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.